Devaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Abhyanatamandasa Jananjana Salakaya Chaksulamidam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Gautam Canto 1, Chapter 5. Text number 12. Naiskarmyam api achyuta bhava varjitam na shobhate jnanam alam niranjanam kutaha punaha shashvat abhadram ishvare na charpitam karma yat api akaranam naishkarmyam api achyuta bhava varjitam nashobhate jnanam alam niranjanam kutapuna shashvada baddhamishvare nacharpitam karma yat apya karmanam naishkarmyam yapi achyuta bhava varjitam nashobhate jnanam alam niranjanam kutapuna shashvara baddhamishvare nacharpitam karma yadapya karnanam. Jeez. Ishkarmyam, self-realization, being freed from the reactions of fruitive work. Api, in spite of. Achyuta, the infallible Lord. Bhava, conception. Varjitam, devoid of. Na, does not. Shobhate, look well. Jnanam, transcendental knowledge. Alam, by and by. Niranjanam, free from designations. Kutaha, where is. Punaha, again. Shashvat, always. Abhadram, uncongenial. Ishvare, unto the Lord. Na, not. Cha, and. Arpitam, offered. Karma, fruitive work. Yadapi, what is. Akaranam, not fruitive. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Knowledge of self-realization, even though free from all material affinity, does not look well if devoid of a conception of the infallible, God. What then is the use of fruitive activities, which are naturally painful from the very beginning and transient by nature, if they are not utilized for the devotional service of the Lord? Purport. As referred to above, not only ordinary literatures devoid of the transcendental glorification of the Lord are condemned, but also Vedic literatures and speculation on the subject of impersonal Brahman when they are devoid of devotional service. When speculation on the impersonal Brahman is condemned on the above ground, then what to speak of ordinary fruitive work, which is not meant to fulfill the aim of devotional service? Such speculative knowledge and fruitive work cannot lead one to the goal of perfection. Fruitive work, in which almost all people in general are engaged, is always painful, either in the beginning or at the end. It can be fruitful only when made subservient to the devotional service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita also it is confirmed that the result of such fruit of work may be offered for the service of the Lord. Otherwise it leads to material bondage. The bona fide enjoyer of the fruit of work is the personality of Godhead, and thus when it is engaged for the sense gratification of the living beings, it becomes an acute source of trouble. The past 2 days we have heard the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam, both negatively in terms of condemnation of ordinary mundane literature, and positively by stating that the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is composed of glorification of the Lord and His name, fame, form, and qualities, and pastimes, is appreciated even by great liberated personalities. Now, there is further glorification of the Bhagavatam by explaining how the Bhagavatam is meant for describing pure devotional service as opposed to the paths of jnana and karma. The context in which these verses is being spoken is that Sri Vyasadeva, who was the compiler of the Vedas and who had already compiled the Vedic literature, was not feeling satisfied with his efforts. Ordinarily, anyone who performs such meritorious work, great service as compilation of the Vedas, would be very satisfied. Just like we often do some devotional service, and afterwards we feel somewhat satisfied. And what is the quality of our service in contrast to Sri Vyasadeva? Maybe we cook an offering for the deities, or we receive a devotee in our home, or maybe even some simpler activity that we perform. Maybe we distribute some books, and we feel very much satisfied. Now, Vyasadeva had just completed the compilation of all the Vedas, and yet he wasn't satisfied. So, this is very extraordinary. And he himself was feeling somewhat confused. Of course, we also have to see how our feelings are. Feelings are not to be neglected. Even if we try to, we can't. Sometimes we become depressed, sometimes we become joyous, and most of the time we react according to our feelings. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures tell us, don't be overwhelmed simply by feelings. But great personalities like Vyasadeva, when they have feelings, they take them into account, because their entire energy is dovetailed in the Lord's service. So whatever they feel is also directed by the Lord. We have to always remember, when studying the behavior of great personalities who are described in the Vedas, that they are not like us. It is mentioned that great persons can do things which ordinary persons cannot do, and they are not affected by good and bad results of their actions. This is because such great personalities are directly under the control of the Lord. Just like Arjuna, for example, may be feeling bewildered or appear bewildered, but we know that Arjuna's bewilderment is not like our bewilderment. it was arranged by Krishna. And the same is true of all great personalities. Their behavior is not ordinary, like Brahma. Brahma also became bewildered at different times. But we should not think that Brahma's bewilderment is like ours. So, at this time when Vyasadeva is feeling confused, we should understand that his depression or discouragement is not exactly like ours. It's not like ours either in the level or in the quality of it. Because here the feeling of insufficiency or dissatisfaction was directly arranged by the Lord to show us what one should do when one is feeling this way, and also to point out why he was feeling this way. The first thing is what one should do. If one is feeling confused or dispirited, one has to turn towards superior guides. One has to turn towards one's guru or one's authority of some type. Husband, wife, they can turn to each other also. Children can turn to their parents. Students can turn to their teachers. Everyone can turn to the Brahmins, the sannyasis, senior Vaishnavas. There are so many persons that we can turn to. And we should do so. Because if we simply go on our own, it is very difficult. This is not an easy path to get out of the material world. And it requires the help of so many persons. And that is why Srila Prabhupada has organized this society of ISKCON to give us the help of so many persons. So we have to maintain very nice relationships with so many persons because we need so much help. If we become callous or indifferent, impersonal in our dealings, then at the time when we need help, we will simply not be able to call for help. Either we will think that no one is capable of helping me, or we won't have the, rapport with the person, the background. You can't simply turn to someone who you have ignored for months and months when you suddenly need that person and think that they're going to be there for you. It doesn't work that way. So, relationships have to be worked on regularly. And that is very important. Otherwise, if it weren't important, we wouldn't find statements like Dadati pratikridati go yamakyati prichate vongte bojayate chaiva sadvidam piti lakshanam. We wouldn't hear Srila Rupa Goswami instructing us that how to maintain loving relationships. To give prasadam, to take prasadam, to give a gift, to receive a gift, to hear or speak confidentially with another. These are all recommendations, and they should be followed. Generally, our Krishna consciousness process automatically makes arrangement for these exchanges. We take prasadam together. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you distribute it. We read and study together, so there's automatically the speaker gets to speak some realizations. Those who are listening get to hear from him. In terms of giving gifts, that may not... It can happen. If you make some effort, you can also give gifts of various types. In any case, there are opportunities for such exchanges. So, the point is that Vyasadeva, he turned to his guru, Narad Muni. His guru is Narad Muni. And Vyasadeva is an incarnation of God. So this is significant, that even when God incarnates, still he takes a guru. So what to speak of ordinary conditioned souls? How necessary it is. And he is submissive. He puts his problem before his spiritual master, and his spiritual master very quickly comes to the point And these are the verses in which the spiritual master is helping his student to understand the problem. And it's very significant, the problem, because Vyasadeva, in compiling the Vedas, has done a great deal of service to Krishna. And he has glorified Krishna in many ways. But very often that glorification has been mixed up with other, you can say, activities. In other words, because Vyasadeva was the well-wisher of all living entities, he wrote the Vedas in such a way that there was something for everyone. And that's the greatness of the Vedic literatures. That we see in India, for example, that everybody reveres the Vedas. And they all quote different parts of the Vedas to justify what they're doing. Those who are worshipping goddess Kali, they quote the Devi literatures, which describe how Devi is all and everything and the greatest of all. Those who are worshippers of Lord Shiva, they quote different scriptures, Shiva Purana and others, which glorify Shiva as supreme. Even those who are impersonalists get to quote from the Upanishads and other literatures to prove their conception. So everybody uses the Vedas to justify their position, which makes it difficult, in one sense, to know what is the true position, what is the true path. Because there's something in the Vedas that can practically prove everything. And even if you can't find it, you can always interpret it that way. Even if you can't find a direct statement, if you're good enough at word wrangling, you can interpret. But finally, we see that even the best of all interpreters, Shankaracharya, finally spouted out, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda Mudhamate. He told his followers, you fools and rascals who are following me, because I'm giving you a completely twisted interpretation, and you're all a bunch of fools that you followed me, just worship Govinda. Just worship Govinda. Of course, Shankaracharya is Lord Shiva, come in a Brahmin form in the Kali Yuga. And he came in this form just to protect the Vaishnavas and the Vedas, because the Vedas had been denied by Lord Buddha. In order to get people to stop eating meat, Lord Buddha had to tell them, don't follow the Vedas, because they were using parts of the Vedas to justify meat eating. But by doing so, he denied the Vedas, and he, also created a lot of confusion. So Shankaracharya came just to set the Vedas again into their proper revered position. But because everyone was already impersonal and atheistic from following Buddha, he gave the Vedas an impersonal twist in order to draw them in. So finally, at the end, he told everybody, actually, I'm just doing this to draw you in. The real purpose of the Vedas is to worship Govinda. Therefore, unless one hears from a proper person, it's not possible to understand what the Vedic import is. And that's why we see that there are many interpretations of Bhagavad Gita, for example. And why Krishna says in the 4th chapter of the Gita that unless you're my devotee and my friend, you're not going to be able to understand the nature of what I'm telling you. Even during Krishna's appearance, many persons could not recognize him as the Supreme Lord. You see, when Krishna went to stop the battle of Kurukshetra, he appealed to Dhritarashtra, he appealed to Duryodhana, and they wouldn't listen. Now, if they accepted Krishna as the Supreme Lord, they certainly would have listened. But they didn't. They could not see him. So this sometimes happens. This sometimes happens. Even, why? Because of desire. Because of material desires. Because of material desires, we can't appreciate the position of the Lord, the Lord's devotee, and devotional service. And that's why we see people sometimes leave. They become overwhelmed by their own desires. So, because the Kali Yuga has come now, and Vyasadeva compiled the literatures of the Vedas for the people of the Kali Yuga, Narada Muni decided to finally say to Vyasa that you have done good work on one hand, because you have at least given everyone some type of progressive path to follow. But ultimately, it's very dangerous what you have done. Because it may be that by following one of these progressive paths, they may become satisfied and not take up the ultimate path of liberation, pure devotional service. So really what you have done is dangerous. And this is pretty much the mentality that we have in preaching. We don't generally recommend to people the paths of jnana, karma, and yoga. Although in some cases we may not have any alternative. But generally we don't. Because we know that they will become cheated. And here it says clearly that. What is the use of the conception of the infallible, which is devoid? What is the use of knowledge of self-realization, which is devoid of the conception of the absolute person, Krishna? That means impersonalism. Impersonalism is also knowledge of self-realization. The impersonalists also have some knowledge that they're not their body. They have their mantras that they chant. They also say everything is Brahman. I am Brahman. All is one. They know that the material nature, the material world, is temporary, an illusion. Even the Buddhists know this. But what they don't know is the personality of Godhead Krishna. So here, the statement is made by Narad Muni that all kinds of knowledge like this, which talks about temporary material life, and we're all we're all spiritual beings. Just like you hear amongst the New Age people, they talk so many different things which approach spirituality, but they have very little knowledge
about the personality of Godhead. And this is the problem. And therefore, it's not very appealing.
Enjoy a first-class seat on an airplane, first-class service of various types, but ultimately, it's only because we know we're going to get to our destination. If you just fly up into the air with all kinds of first-class treatment, and then you are told, attention passengers, due to certain technical difficulties, we have no other alternative but to stay up in the air for the next, 36 days. But don't worry, the drinks are free. Immediately, even the people in first class will feel totally uncomfortable, and they won't like it because they're not going to get to their destination. So Prabhupada says that the Brahman realization is something like this. You go up in the air, but they don't land anywhere. They just keep hovering. And therefore, it may be a sense of eternity that they get, but they don't get bliss. They're not blissful. Because the nature of the soul is to have relationship, to have love, to be relating. And those who are Brahman realize they don't get this experience. They just feel eternity. And that in itself is a type of heady experience, an intoxicating experience. And that's why we see, just like people want that experience. In fact, they think it's not bad because at least it gets them out of the present suffering that they have. Present suffering, we know, most of it is due to interpersonal dealings. So at least they think, okay, I'm getting out of this position. Something is better than nothing. But actually, they won't be ultimately satisfied. And here it says, what then is the use of fruitive activities? If impersonal realization, which is a type of liberation, if that's not ultimately satisfying, then what to speak of fruitive activities which are not liberating? Fruitive activities means you do something for some material result. Just like it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, the worship of the demigods is for fruitive, results. And Krishna says the results are temporary and limited. Those who go to the planets of the demigods, have to come back again. So certainly that type of realization is practically futile. And here Prabhupada says, he very clearly says, it is always painful in the beginning or at the end. Everyone knows this. Nobody enjoys no one would go to work if you didn't get paid. Even if you say, I like my work, let's see, if someone says, I like my work, we say, let's see how much you like it if you don't get a salary. You'll still like it? Even if you say, I enjoy my work, I don't think it's true. You enjoy your work only because ultimately you're going to get paid. If you didn't get paid, you'd look for another type of job, no matter how much you thought you enjoyed it. So, this type of fruitive activities of all types are problematic. In the beginning, they're problematic at the end. And the ultimate result is zero, because it all ends. I was studying one book just to see how an author was writing. And this person took so much trouble to write this book. And he wrote it very, 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 very expertly. It was a bestseller. But at the end, when it was all over, there was not a single gain. I was appreciating how lucky we are that we have these transcendental literatures that when you finish reading them, you feel so much benefit. You feel that, you have understood so much about why you're suffering in this material world and how to get out of this material world. But I read this novel, expertly written, no doubt, expertly written. But at the end, it was exactly like a cloud passing in the sky, or as Prabhupada says, foam on the waves. It was interesting for a while, and then it was gone. And you were not one bit better off for it at the end than when you had begun, except that you lost so many hours. I didn't lose hours because I was using it to hopefully improve writing skills. But actually, anybody who would read this for that purpose of enjoyment, all they gained out of it, they didn't gain anything. They lost so many valuable hours, which cannot be gained back by millions and millions and millions of dollars. And this is the nature of sense gratification, of whatever type. Just like you take the kids to, let's say, what are those things called? That waters, what are those things? Those waters, huh? What's it called? Wet and Wild. So you go through all of these, loops and hoops and down the slides. But at the end, you dry off and it's over. It's finished. It's just, you're right back where you were. And that's or even more ridiculous are these, Ferris wheels and, these, what are those things called? The roller, no, but they have a specific name, huh? No, each ride has its own name, my point is. So they have some, and you go through it, and practically people, sometimes at the end they vomit, they're nauseous, they practically their soul has left their bodies, and they pay for it. They have to pay for that. Huh? What is it called? Wait in line for 2 hours, right? So many difficulties, just to suffer, Or, even, we see people waiting in line to also go to eat so many horrible things, which we know what the karma is for those horrible things. They're going to suffer like anything. Terrible, terrible, results in the long run. Actually, when we study the nature of life, when we mix with the persons in the world, with the knowledge that we've gained from the Bhagavatam, you have to feel sorry. If devotees tell me that they don't feel any compassion, I can only think that maybe they're not reading the books or thinking. Because when you think a little bit about how much people are suffering and how much they're going to suffer, just a simple act, someone's birthday and the father takes his, the mother take their kids out for a birthday party and they go and eat a big steak dinner, and they actually want to help the child and, give the child some present or some gift, and actually all they're doing is they're all creating such hellish futures for themselves. But people don't know this. There's a temple They had some temple in China. It's still there. And maybe it wasn't in China. Maybe it was in Singapore. But anyway, I forget. It was in some place. And they built this temple, the Buddhists built it, to show the different types of hells. And each room is a different hell. In Singapore. Yeah, each room, and each room was a different hell. And they graphically show with, statues or whatever you want to call it, the different types of tortures in 18 different hells. And Maharaj and his representatives are all sinning. Because the Buddhists have taken this all from Vedic literature. The hells are the same, basically. And, it's very educational. It is very educational. But we don't have that. Instead, they have Disney World, where you have some type of perversion. What? Yeah, that's what he's saying like that. They have that. They have that because the purpose is to educate people. If people would be properly educated, I think children would go through this experience. It's not that, it's frightening, but it's not frightening if you have knowledge. If your parent is holding the child's hand and telling him, don't worry, Johnny, that's not where you're going to go because you're going to be chanting Hare Krishna. Then the child thinks, okay, and just looks and remembers. The picture goes in his mind and remembers that because this person did this sin, this is what happened. It's very graphic. Very, very graphic. And this is valuable. You see? So Srimad Bhagavatam has that. 5th canto. The different hells are explained. Everything is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And if we read carefully and then we proceed to act in life, we will naturally feel compassion. Therefore, book distributors can feel compassionate when they go out on Sankirtan because they have this knowledge. And when they see these conditioned souls, and it's just horrible to see how they're entangled in material life so much, naturally you want to give them this transcendental knowledge, to give them a book. And because you have that sincere desire, that sincerity will be transmitted to the person and they will take a book. They will take a book. So, here the point is mentioned that fruitive activities must be utilized for the service of Krishna, for the pleasure of Krishna, and then it will be uplifting. The famous verse that Prabhupada always quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, that work binds one in this world. But if the work is done for the pleasure of Krishna, then it liberates one. So we have to remember this, that work has to be done for the pleasure of Krishna. Whatever that work is, it has to be done for the pleasure of Krishna. Krishna is Bhaktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. He is the enjoyer of sacrifice. And Yajnartat Kamano Yata, Loko Yam Karma Bandhana. This Yajna Karma. Yajna Karma. Karma means work, Yajna means sacrifice. Work has to be done as a sacrifice for the Lord. Otherwise, karma bandhana, that work binds you. But mukta sangha samachara. If you offer the results of the work to Krishna, that same work becomes liberating. It's a very simple principle. Simple principle that we should all understand. Now, of course, this is only ABC. Because to offer the result of the work to the Lord just because we want liberation or because we don't want to suffer is not really bhakti. It's a type of yoga. You can say karma mishra bhakti. It's bhakti yoga mixed with karma, fruit of desire. I still want to enjoy the results of my work, but I know that God is there. Just like I always remember the example of one of my godbrothers who was living up at our farm in Oklahoma, and he had his own deity in his house, and whatever he would do, he said he offered to his deity. So I always used, because this person, whenever he would want to, we would ask him to do any service, he'd always say, "You'll have to pay me." So, one day I went to his house and I was trying to preach to him about pure devotional service and how it's not supposed to be fruit. And he said, "Well, I offer everything in my house to the deity." I said, "That's all right." I said, "Because in your house, everything you offer to this deity, you get back after you offer it. I said, if Krishna is one, why don't you offer it to our deity in the temple? I said, the difference is that our deity won't give it back to you. But this deity does. So that's Karma Mishra Bhakti. I know that God has to have it first, but actually I have a lot of desires. So all right, since I don't want to get tied up in bad reactions by sinful activity, I'll offer it first and then I'll get it. That's not really pure bhakti. Because we know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us many verses which explain that nadanamna janamna sundarim kavitam vajagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmani yeshure bhavatat bhakti rohoituki. I don't want all of these things. I don't even care if I have to take birth after birth. He says, I don't even want liberation. I just want your causeless devotional service. And he says, I don't mind if whatever happens to me, I just want to be your sold out servant. This is actually, pure bhakti means where there's no business transaction. Just like Prabhupada glorifies the gopis because they had that mood of serving Krishna. They were prepared to overcome all types of things. In Chaitanya Chaitamrita Adi Lila chapter 4, nice verses which describe the glories of the gopis' position. And it mentions there, they put aside all things, even things like, what appears to be, chastity or loyalty to, family members, you can say reputation. They didn't care. They ignored reputation. They ignored so many things simply to give pleasure to Krishna. And it's described there that this is the difference between lust and love. Lust aims at one's own enjoyment. Love aims at the enjoyment of the beloved. So, gopis and other residents of Vrindavan, this is their mood. Just like Srimati Radharani. You can see she's holding her umbrella today because it's raining. And who is the umbrella for? It is for Krishna. And little Radharani is holding a tulsi garland. Who is the tulsi garland for? It's for little Govinda. So this is Srimati Radharani. Everything about her is for the pleasure of Krishna. And this is love. This is bhakti. Bhakti means when we purify all of the selfish motives out of the formula of offering service to Krishna. Ahoy tuki. Pratihata. Yatma suprashidati. This alone is satisfying. When the devotion we offer is causeless. Normally, the service we offer has a cause. The cause is some desire to fulfill one of our desires. But that's not pure bhakti. Uttama bhakti is described that it's, without this, not free from gyan, free from karma. That is uttama bhakti. Bhaktir uttama. So, the whole process of Krishna consciousness, which is described in the Nectar of Devotion, the science of Krishna consciousness, is meant to bring us to that point. So we have to do this now. When we do devotional service daily, we should try to see what our motives are and purify out all kinds of fruitive motives. Our only interest should be to offer pure service to the Lord as we are guided by our Guru and Vaishnavas. And that means, Rupa Goswami says, be prepared to give up some things you don't want to give up. Be prepared to do some things you don't want to do. Because if you're not prepared like that, don't think that you can get to the point, the goal of Krishna consciousness. It won't be possible. You'll be diverted. As Vyasa has been corrected by Narad Muni, that you have offered many, many mixed paths. Jnana, karma, yoga. But you have not yet described Uttama Bhakti. You have not yet compiled a literature which is just for Uttama Bhakti. That's Srimad Bhagavatam. So each one of us has to ascertain that what I am doing each day, is it pure or is it mixed with motives? And if it's mixed with motives, how can I get free? How can I free the service I'm doing from those mixtures? All right, so similarly, I just say one lesson. Similarly in chanting Hare Krishna, The chanting of Hare Krishna is devotional service. It is meant to be pure devotional service. But because we are still committing offenses, it is mixed. So while you're chanting, again, the same process has to take place. Every day you get 2 hours to practice chanting purely. Not just chanting, chanting purely. If you're just chanting and you're allowing other things to mix in, that's not right. And remember that what you do at other times in the day is part of the 2 hours of chanting. Because if you're fruitive in your other activities, that is offense against the holy name when you chant. Because naturally when you chant, you'll be praying for the fulfillment of those fruitive desires. So the whole thing ties together, and the chanting for 2 hours of japa is really where, it all comes down, where you can, it's like the screen, and you can see what's what. Okay, we'll stop here. Anyone have any questions? Bhakti Niraj.
I had a question, a little bit about, we were talking about Vyasdev, and he was compiling the literature, and I'm trying to fit this in a time frame, like when Lord Krishna appeared, when he started compiling, and at what point, because they say that after Lord Krishna departed, the Bhagavatam has arisen. So is it that he appeared before Lord Krishna, and he started compiling all these literatures, and then after the disappearance of Krishna, that he compiled the Bhagavatam?
I can't say exactly. Maybe your Guru Maharaj knows the historical dates. I'm not sure the exact historical date of Vyasa's appearance.
Maybe not even date, but just in relation to when Lord Krishna appeared.
But the dates should be known. You ask him, then you can tell us. He may know that.
You have to listen from authority, like to listen to brahmanas and children to parents for guidance. Like that, the great Raja Rishis like Ambarish, Prithu Maharaj, and Lord Ramachandra took instructions from brahmanas. But they already at such an exalted level, they know what is right and what is wrong. If they were to get instructions from brahmanas, who might not be as elevated as them, somebody could still be a brahmana, but he could not be a very exalted Vaishnava. How do you discriminate? In this case, one should really take instruction from so-called brahmanas.
But the great personalities in the Bhagavatam who take instruction from brahmanas do so to show that they're not independent. And the Brahmins were qualified. Generally the Brahmins were Vaishnava Brahmins. You see that, for example, when Bali Maharaj was instructed by Sukacharya incorrectly, he didn't accept that. And Sukacharya was a highly qualified Brahmin. But he gave the wrong advice. So Bali Maharaj rejected it. So these persons who they took advice from were Vaishnava Brahmins. Otherwise they had no interest to talk to them. It's not just that they were so materially qualified Brahmins. It's a fact that some Brahmins may not be Vaishnavas, pure Vaishnavas. But those Brahmins were not the ones who they would take advice from. They were qualified persons that they asked. And they gave qualified advice.
We should have this compassion for the authority, this desire to read the book. At the same time, we should have no desires of all the desires of being pleased with the Lord. Like, how can we do that?
Huh? I don't get it.
The only desire should be like to please the Lord by your activity.
Okay.
So sometimes you get a book to read, you might think, actually I have no business out here. Just want to please my guru, the Lord.
Okay.
And you should have, they would say also, you should have this desire to give the books to these people also out of compassion.
Okay.
How can we put these two together?
You don't think that by giving the books to the people out of compassion, that that's pleasing the Lord?
Yes, but it's like a separate desire.
It is? Maybe in your mind it is. I can't imagine how giving books to people out of compassion is separate desire from pleasing the Lord. It gives the Lord the greatest pleasure. He says that giving this transcendental knowledge to others is the thing which pleases me the most. That's called dovetailing desire and the desire of Krishna. You may have 1,000,000 desires, but the point is that all 1,000,000 of those desires should be pleasing to the Lord. Then there's no contradiction. You can have 1,000,000 different desires, but if every one of those desires, just like Radharani, she has 1,000,000 desires, and every one of those desires gives pleasure to Krishna. The point is that you have to test the desire to see if it's pleasing to Krishna. Then it's acceptable. But in her mind, it's not that she's thinking, I have a desire that I want fulfilled. Now let's see if it also pleases Krishna. It doesn't work like that. She is Krishna's pleasure potency. Whatever comes in her mind is only for the purpose of pleasing Krishna. So when we become purely Krishna conscious, does it give pleasure to Krishna? But actually it's not yet pure. Pure is when there's no other thought in the mind except the pleasure of the Lord. Yes, Indranila. Spiritually, everything is compatible. So if one has difficulties with compatibility, it's definitely in the material world. Because it's described that in the spiritual world, everything is absolute. The Lord is spiritual. The devotee is spiritual. The world itself there is spiritual. So where is the incompatibility? Incompatibility has to do with the 3 modes of material nature. The 3 modes may be incompatible. The mixtures of the goodness, passion, and ignorance, as they mix in different combinations, are not compatible. But in the spiritual world, there's an absence of the 3 modes of material nature. Everything is Satchidananda, all eternity, knowledge, and bliss. There's no possibility of incompatibility in the spiritual world. Everything is compatible. So the more we come into the consciousness called Krishna consciousness, the more we will be compatible in all situations with everything. The center has to be Krishna. Just like if you go to a body of water and you throw many pebbles in the water, they each make circles, and the circles collide. But if all the circles was the same center, then you may have so many rings of circles, but they will never collide. So if everyone agrees to make Krishna the center, then there can be no incompatibility. Incompatibility comes when everyone puts themselves as a center. Then the circles collide. Then there's so many pebbles. So as long as we all agree that Krishna and Guru are at the center, then where's the incompatibility? Yes, Nandini?
Sometimes you see that different devotees with loving temple environment and society they are serving Krishna, but still there's incompatibility.
Never. There's never incompatibility if they're truly serving Krishna. It's because they have selfish, separate desires that this happens. There's no possibility when someone is Krishna conscious from being incompatible with someone else who's Krishna conscious. It is impossible. No possibility. It will be for the pleasure of Krishna. If we see any type of, even we see in the spiritual world where there's competition, just between the gopis they have different parties. But still Krishna is pleased by this competition. And we should not think that our incompatibility is something akin to their competition. It's not. Ours is based on, I don't like your mind, you don't like my mind, I don't like your body, you don't like my body, I want this, and you want the same thing, we both can't have it. This is mundane. There's no question of incompatibility if people are actually Krishna conscious. It's mundane to see that. If you judge another Vaishnava based on their previous karma, which means the subtle body they have or the gross body they have, that's offensive. You're not supposed to see a Vaishnava as coming from a particular designation.
Often it seems well, maybe that's true, but I sometimes see that it's more as like a conflict in someone's mood. In other words, someone's mood towards
Yeah, someone's mood of incomplete surrender. It's a conflict in the mood because the mood is not completely surrendered. If it's complete surrender, there will be no such thing. It doesn't work that way.
Sometimes it seems that someone will justify one's envy as, oh, I just can't get along because we're not compatible. But actually, but you're envious that that person is doing something better.
Yeah, it may be due to envy or so many reasons. Gaur Nataraj.
My understanding is correct. Even Namabhas completely eradicates all sin. Is it possible for somebody to chant 15, 20 years and not even utter one Namabhas and chanting so much?
Yes, one could chant for a whole lifetime and not come to Namabhas. Seeing Lord Jagannath on Ratha Yatra also frees you from all sin. But we're so sinful that the next moment we get overcome by millions of sins again. But whether we actually see Lord Jagannath at Ratha Yatra, that's another question. You're seeing the deity, but are you seeing the deity? Because if you actually were seeing the deity and you saw Krishna face to face, then you'd be a pure devotee right now. But who here feels that they're a pure devotee? You go to Vrindavan, you're in the spiritual world. But we go to Vrindavan for days and days and days and days, and we still go out and do so many sins. Therefore, unless the consciousness is right, the physical act itself does not liberate one. It has to do with consciousness. Unless the consciousness is full of prema, of love for Krishna, these activities are not on the liberated platform.
It's mentioned that Lord Chaitanya is the bestower of mercy to the most sinful.
Yeah, so he is bestowing mercy. Instead of sending you direct to hell for the next 1,000,000 births, he's allowing you to spend 25 years as a sadhaka, or 50 years, or 2 lifetimes, or 5 lifetimes. That's his mercy. His mercy is that he's letting you join the Krishna consciousness movement when actually we had no business. Based upon our previous sins, we should have been in hell for the next 1,000,000 births. But by the grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's letting us chant Hare Krishna. You want to get love of God. And if you don't get love of God, in a few years you say, Lord Chaitanya is not really the deliverer of the most fallen. He's delivering, but it takes time because we're resisting. He can deliver you, Prabhupada says, in a single moment. But we're not prepared. He tries to deliver us, but we race away. We struggle. He holds out his hand, but we don't take it. Or suddenly we take it for a month or 2 months, or a day or 1 hour. But then the next hour we reject it. The next month we reject it. But if someone steadily tries for the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there's no doubt that he will get it. There's no doubt. But then you have to show your sincerity by showing very great determination. Not that for a single moment or a short time I'm very enthusiastic. This is not such a cheap thing. To give love of God. It's not such a cheap thing. If supposing someone is bluffing, for 1 year I'll show that I'm sincere. You think that Lord Chaitanya is such a fool, he's going to let that person into the kingdom of God? Then as soon as the person gets there, all these other things come in again? No. 100% pure. And just to make sure, take 1 birth in the universe where Krishna is appearing for final testing and preparation. Then go back to Godhead. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi.